think just a few reflections for me first, and then maybe to dive into 2 or 3 of the recommendations that were given to NHS England. Bill made lots of recommendations to lots of bodies, and I won't try and steal their thunder, but I might try and bring that together somehow. But the first of all, the reflections for me, I think are built on some of the elements that I talked about earlier this morning. And first and foremost for me, it's the 2 words come to mind for me. One is respect, and one is trust. And so could this happen again somewhere else? Is it happening today? Almost certainly. Could it happen again in the future? Almost definitely. Until we really start to understand that balance that needs to exist between the relationships that we have with our patients, but also that we have with each other in terms of being staff members, supporting our patients in their own particular journey, whatever that is and wherever that is. And there's 2 elements that we fail consistently is respecting each other, respecting each other's views, and trusting each other. And one without one, the other falls down. And that goes back to, therefore, it's the ethical principles around which we work, we learn, and we train. And absolutely applaud Bill's view that we have to learn together, we have to train together, and we have to deliver care together. None of us delivers care on our own. We deliver with our patients. And I want to come back to that again. There's no point of us being in a room treating someone if our patient isn't part of that learning experience and being part of that mechanism as well. So for me, that's a crucial element. The other one is accountability. And we are accountable for what we do because we're given a very privileged position to be able to determine a direction of travel in whatever it is, whatever tribal field we have in terms of healthcare. But we are given that privileged position, and therefore we are accountable for helping and making decisions, and we're accountable for helping and supporting our patients get a better outcome. As I said earlier, they're the experts. They came to us for help, so we're accountable for helping them do that. In the cockpit, there is a very open culture of sharing when things go wrong. But there's a strict accountability in that zone as well. And you're accountable for sharing. You're accountable for identifying and recognizing because not only your team is at risk, but your passengers that you may be carrying are at risk. So that accountability is absolutely crucial. The other reflection for me, I think, is one of this sharing the learning piece. And when Bruce Keogh did his review of those trusts who were deemed at the time to have high SMR and shimmies related to the mean, so 2 SDs away they were, he identified a number of trusts, probably a little bit more than the ones that were in the end looked at, but 14 trusts. I have to ask the question continually, why those trusts, while they were part of other systems? And so we have clusters of trusts around the country who were part of that review, but we also have them sitting very close to the excellent trusts that there are as well. So the Frimleys, the Salfords, the Lees, the Writing Lees. Why is it that we have these excellent trusts and almost nearby the same patients, often going between trusts, who were deemed to have very high, at the time, shimmies and underneath it all, a lot of issues about their own safety improvement systems. So we are desperate in this country about sharing our learning, sharing our best practice. Question earlier about how do you come up with solutions when you're when you're overheating. The solutions are there. We're just not sharing. We're just not appreciating and learning from each other how to do that. So for me, the other question that comes out from Bill's report is, what are we doing to learn how to reduce our perinatal avoidable death rates, to use a phrase that I think is an appropriate one for many of those babies who die. And why is it that we are currently 33rd out of 35 of the current cohort of nations that, albeit with slightly different methodologies for denominators and for collecting data, but we are not doing well. We're doing terribly at this. And yet we have systems, and Jason Galdosi's in the room. He's worked on a system to help support reduction in. Why aren't we learning rapidly on how to do this across the whole piece? And that's a tribal issue too. So it's working and learning between obstetricians and midwives. It's learning between the whole systems that are supporting that particular group that Bill looked at in Morecambe Bay. But it's a much wider construct. It's a much wider issue for us in all the pathways that we are supporting our patients in. So the other bit was what are we doing in terms of a direction of travel, and two or three of the points that the report came out was how are we supporting an improved process for reporting, guidance for reporting, identifying that there is a methodology for collecting. Many of you in the room will have heard me talk about that the current NRLS was great for the day that it was designed, but it's not great for the future. And we have a process in place for a national reporting system that also becomes a reporting system for every sector and every setting, which it currently isn't at the moment. It's very, very heavily biased towards hospitals. It hardly picks up any data from the 375 million episodes of care that take place in primary care and community settings. It's a pretty clunky system for reporting, and it's a pretty awful system for learning from. So where is the L in NRLS? And how systematic is that? So we're working and producing at the stage of launching a process to procure a new system. The other question and criticism, helpful criticism, was to identify how the framework could be used for incident reporting. How could that be made easier to use? How could it be made more widely available? And that work is now in place, and that's been published, and we're getting a lot of feedback on that process. But why is it that we still have different systems in play with NRLS, with STICE? Often the data is different. We have a never events reporting system as well, or the ever events as some of us call them. So where are we in terms of that, trying to get some coherence to that? And that's the work that we're in play at the moment. The third piece in terms of reporting, but the framework, it was the investigation process itself. You'll notice that the government asked NHS England to look closely at that in March to identify what's feasible in terms of an investigation process that would be more allied to best practice in other safety-conscious organisations, so nuclear industry, aviation, aerospace, military. And we've been doing and this is based on a pilot, set of pilots that we've been doing, looking at investigation processes in general. And what we've found over the last 18 months is that the huge variability in terms of the investigation process itself, huge variability in terms of the quality of the outcomes of those investigation processes, but huge numbers of investigations taking place. Huge numbers of investigations taking place locally, often coming up with the same answers. So I'm minded then about the whole issue of reporting and actionable response and feedback to those who've said, we've made a mistake, we want to rectify that mistake. Do we really need to carry on doing hundreds of thousands of investigations on the same issues? in our current style? So that's an open question. Where are we in terms of a system, a local responsive system? I make a mistake, I go to my colleague or my next in line to say, I've made a mistake. What's his or her responsibility in saying, okay, Mike, what can we do to rectify that mistake? What's the learning from that now? Let's do it now. Let's do it today, within 24 hours, while our memories are fresh. Why wait, write a report 72 hours, then post it, and then try and make sure it's placed? And usually this is exactly the same scenario that happens in patient complaints as well. Often the complaints department is at the end of a long corridor where no one likes to go. It's usually one or two people, one person often, responding to a whole panoply of issues. So we have to really unlock this. So the other element for me on the investigation process is that it's rarely that the patient or the family are part of the whole journey of that investigation. They're often brought in, as you all know, at a point towards the end when people feel safe that they seem to know what's going on, even the fact that no one's ever asked the patient or their family what happened. So there's an issue for me about the construct of how we investigate and where our patients are in part of that process. And I think that's all for me, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay.